Hi everyone, I'm going to talk about Bhagavad Gita. It's one of the oldest books in the world and India's biggest bestseller. But yes, people does say about this that isn't it meant only for religious old people? Isn't it very long and super difficult to read? Isn't the stuff it talks about way too complex for regular folks to understand? Well, prepare to be surprised. So, what's the big deal about the Bhagavad Gita? You've heard of it. You've studied about it in history class. You've seen it take center stage in court scenes in old Bollywood movies. Remember when the actor standing in the witness box places his or her right hand on it and vows to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And you've often wondered why so many people get all solemn and dewy eyed and worshipful about a book that last time you checked looked like the most difficult thing anyone could ever read. Well, let's find out, shall we? But first, let's figure out what you really know about the Bhagavad Gita. What is the Bhagavad Gita? Is it a Sanskrit poem written in India some 2500 years ago? The title of which literally means the Song of the Lord? Or is it the holy book of the Hindus? Is it a small part of an Indian epic poem called the Mahabharatas? Or is it a conversation between two friends called Krishna and Arjun? Is it a book of wisdom about how to live a good life and a righteous one? Well, it is all about what I said. And now that we have established that the Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata, we can proceed to the next logical question. What is the Mahabharata? Is it the world's longest epic poem written about 2500 years ago? Or is it one of India's two great Sanskrit epics, the other being the Ramayana? Or is it the story of a great war between two sets of cousins, the five Pandavas, aka the good guys, and the 100 Kauravas, aka the not so good guys? Or is it a set of stories within stories so intricately interwoven that very few people can claim to know all the stories and all the characters in it? Or is it the inspiration for innumerable books, a super hit television series, and countless movies, plays, and folk songs in every Indian language? Well, it is all of it. But now, let's get to the details a little bit and see how one answers to these questions. The Mahabharata, which the Bhagavad Gita is part of, is made up of 18 parvs or books, each of which is further divided into chapters. How many chapters does the Gita itself have? Well, the answer is the Bhagavad Gita has the same number of chapters as the Mahabharata has parvs, that is 18. Just like the rest of the Mahabharata, the Gita is written entirely in two-line verses or couplets called shlokas. In all, the Mahabharata has more than 1 lakh shloks. How many of these make up the Gita? It has, surprise, just 700 shloks, less than 1% of all the shlokas in the mother epic. Which parv of the Mahabharata is the Gita a part of? Well, it is the part of the 6th parv. Yes, it makes an appearance quite early on in the story. The question is to ask, therefore, How come a set of verses that is such a tiny part of India's great epic is better known than the epic itself? What exactly makes the Bhagavad Gita so important and so revered? Only one way to find out. We have already figured out that the Mahabharata is about a great war and the Gita is a conversation between two friends called Krishna and Arjun. When does this conversation happen? The Gita conversation started just a few minutes before the Great War began, and since it wasn't a short conversation, it almost certainly held everything up for a longish time. Yes, not the best timing for a long conversation, but there you go. What is this long 700 sloka conversation actually about? It was mostly Krishna talking about the 700 verses, and he was essentially telling Arjuna to stop whining and start fighting the great war. Which of course leads us to the next set of questions. You're kidding me, right? So one friend tells another friend to stop complaining and get going and take some 700 verses to say it. And that conversation becomes one of the greatest books of wisdom in the world. Why? That's the real question, isn't it? The short answer is that it is because Krishna also told Arjun why he should fight, even though it was going to be the hardest thing in the world for him to go to war against his closest family. Even so, that conversation was between them and it had its part to play in their story. Why is something that happened in a story, even the longest epic poem in the world, considered so wonderful, so wise, and so important even today? That's the interesting bit. You see, stories, especially old stories that still get told and read and discussed thousands of years after they were first written, are very often more than just stories. They are really parables. Stories that contain within them hidden truths, lessons, morals, and wisdom that we can all learn from. The Gita is one of the greatest conversations in the world to listen into, because what Krishna is telling Arjuna is really a message he's sending out to all of us and how to live our lives in the most honest, best possible way. Alright, so we'll continue with the series and talk about the Bhagavad Gita in my next video. Thank you so much for listening. Do subscribe and get hooked on to this marvelous piece of book of Hindus, the Bhagavad Gita.